The afternoon sun of a perfect Virginia June cast long, gentle shadows across the manicured lawn of the Walker residence. It was a scene ripped from a magazine cover. A sprawling suburban home with pristine white siding, a wraparound porch, and a yard filled with the vibrant chaos of a child's birthday party. Colorful balloons strained against their strings, tethered to the deck railing. The air, thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and sizzling burgers, echoed with the joyful shrieks of children and the warm laughter of their parents. This was Emily Walker's world, a perfect illusion she had mistaken for reality. She moved through the gathering with an effortless grace, her smile as bright as the sunshine. She refilled a neighbor's glass of lemonade, straightened the party hat on a shy toddler, and shared a knowing look with another mother as they watched their children chase each other around a large oak tree. At the center of it all, her husband, David, commanded the state-of-the-art grill. Handsome, charismatic, and endlessly charming, he was the architect of this perfect life. He flipped a burger with a theatrical flair, making the children giggle, then winked at Emily over the rising smoke. The gesture, so familiar and loving, sent a wave of contentment through her. This was everything she had ever wanted. Their son, Leo, the birthday boy, tore across the grass with a pack of his friends, his face alight with the pure, unadulterated joy of turning 5. His laughter was the soundtrack to Emily's happiness. She watched him, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. David, a renowned financial consultant, had provided them with this security, this beautiful life. After her father, Robert Peterson, had passed away 10 years ago, leaving her adrift and alone, David had been her anchor. He had not only mended her broken heart, but had also brilliantly invested the inheritance her father left her, turning a modest sum into the foundation of their idyllic existence. Or so he had told her. "He's a miracle worker, that husband of yours," said Mrs. Gable from next door, gesturing with her plastic cup toward David. "Turns everything he touches to gold." Emily's smile widened. "I'm the lucky one." The idyllic scene continued, a flawless portrait of suburban bliss. David brought a plate over to Emily, stealing a quick kiss. Leo, exhausted from his games, ran to his mother and buried his face in her dress. She wrapped her arms around his small, warm body, inhaling the scent of sunshine and sugar. In that moment, everything was right. The world was safe, her family was secure, and love was the unshakable foundation of it all. It was precisely then that the first discordant note sounded. 3 black SUVs, sleek and menacing, pulled up to the curb with an unnerving silence. They seemed to absorb the light, their tinted windows reflecting a distorted, grim version of the cheerful party. The laughter in the yard began to falter as doors opened and men in dark suits and windbreakers emblazoned with bold yellow letters, FBI, emerged. They moved with a shared, unhurried purpose, their gazes fixed on the house, their faces devoid of all emotion. The perfect illusion was about to be shattered. The music from the small portable speaker seemed to warp and die. Laughter caught in throats. One by one, the guests turned, their smiles dissolving into expressions of confusion and alarm. The idyllic bubble that had enveloped the backyard popped, leaving a vacuum of tense, sudden silence. The FBI agents, led by a tall man with a stoic, unreadable face, walked past the festive decorations as if they didn't exist. Their polished black shoes left imprints in the soft green grass, marching directly toward the heart of the celebration. David froze, a spatula still in his hand. The charming host persona evaporated, replaced by a fleeting, raw look of panic that he immediately tried to conceal with a facade of confused indignation. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice a little too loud, a little too strained. The lead agent, who would later be identified as Agent Jensen, didn't slow his pace. He stopped directly in front of David, his eyes cold and methodical. "David Walker?" "Yes," David said, forcing a nervous laugh. "Is there a problem?" Agent Jensen didn't answer the question. He simply stated, "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and mail fraud." As he spoke, 2 other agents flanked David, deftly taking the spatula from his hand and pulling his arms behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs was unnaturally loud in the stunned silence. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Emily felt the world tilt. Leo, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, tightened his grip on her leg, his small face pressed into the fabric of her dress. "Mommy?" he whimpered. Emily couldn't answer. Her breath was trapped in her lungs, her gaze locked on the impossible scene unfolding before her. This had to be a mistake, a prank, a terrible, horrible misunderstanding. David looked at her, his eyes wide with a frantic energy. "Em, it's a mistake," he called out, his voice cracking. "Some kind of mix-up with a client. I swear." The agents began leading him away, past the half-eaten cake, past the table of untouched presents, past the horrified faces of their friends and neighbors. The looks on their faces were a painful collage of pity, shock, and a morbid curiosity that made Emily's skin crawl. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pierced through her disbelief. Just before they guided him around the side of the house, David twisted his head back, his voice desperate. "It's a misunderstanding, Em. I love you. Just wait for my call." And then he was gone. The black SUVs pulled away from the curb as silently as they had arrived. The party was over. The guests, avoiding Emily's eyes, gathered their children and began to leave in a hurried, awkward exodus. Murmurs of, "I'm so sorry, Emily," and "if you need anything," were offered, but they felt hollow, distant. Within minutes, the yard was empty. Emily stood alone, a silent sentinel amidst the wreckage of her son's 5th birthday party. The bright balloons now seemed to mock her, cheerful witnesses to the complete and utter collapse of her world. Leo's quiet sobs were the only sound left. The hours that followed David's arrest were a thick, suffocating fog. Emily moved on autopilot, her mind a maelstrom of denial and confusion. She carried a sleeping Leo upstairs, the weight of his small body a grounding, tangible reality in a world that had suddenly lost all its meaning. She tucked him into bed, kissing his tear-stained cheek, and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Everything's going to be okay." It was a lie, and the taste of it was bitter in her mouth. Downstairs, the house was a tomb. The remnants of the party, paper plates, discarded napkins, a deflating balloon skittering across the hardwood floor, felt like archaeological artifacts from a lost civilization. She mechanically began to clean, needing the mindless motion to keep from shattering completely. With every plastic fork she threw away, David's final words echoed in her head. "It's a misunderstanding. I love you. Just wait for my call." She clung to those words like a drowning woman to a piece of driftwood. It had to be a mistake. David was a good man, a loving husband, a devoted father. Maybe a powerful client was trying to frame him. Maybe it was a case of mistaken identity. Her mind spun, weaving elaborate scenarios that all ended with David walking back through the front door, laughing at the absurdity of it all. It all ended with the alternative, that the man she had built her life with was a criminal, was simply too monstrous to contemplate. She spent the night on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the darkened screen of the television. Sleep was impossible. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones, but her mind was starting to clear. The initial shock was giving way to a gnawing, cold dread, and with that dread came a memory, small and insignificant at the time, but now sharp and unsettling. It was from last week. She had walked into the kitchen as David was ending a call, his voice low and tense. "No, the risk is priced in," he'd said, his back to her. The old man never saw it coming, and neither will they. When he saw her, he'd ended the call abruptly, a flicker of something, annoyance? Fear? Crossing his face before being replaced by his usual easy smile. He'd kissed her and explained it away as boring shop talk about a hostile takeover scenario. She hadn't thought twice about it. But now, the memory felt different. The words, "the old man never saw it coming," snagged in her mind, a sharp hook in the smooth fabric of her denial. Who was the old man? What risk was he talking about? For the first time since the black SUVs had arrived, a genuine crack appeared in the foundation of her faith in him. It was a tiny fissure, but through it, a terrifying darkness began to seep. She was still holding on to the belief that it was all a misunderstanding, but the grip of her conviction had started to weaken. On the third day, the silence of the house became an active, pressing force. The call from David never came. Instead, a call came from a lawyer a friend had recommended, who spoke in grim, practical terms about arraignments and bail hearings. He needed financial documents, insurance policies, anything that could help him understand David's situation. The request propelled Emily into motion, forcing her toward the one room in the house that had always felt more like David's territory than their shared space: his home office. She pushed open the door and was met with a blast of cool, sterile air. The room was the epitome of modern professionalism. A massive mahogany desk stood polished and bare except for a sleek laptop and a single framed photo of her and Leo, a photo she now realized was more of a prop than a sentiment. The bookshelves were filled not with novels, but with leather-bound tomes on market theory and international finance. There was no clutter, no personal touch, nothing of the warm, slightly chaotic man she thought she knew. The room felt like a stage set, and a cold dread washed over her. She began her search, her movements stiff and reluctant. She opened the drawers of his desk, finding them organized with an almost obsessive precision. Pens were aligned in their tray, paper clips sorted by size. It was the desk of a stranger. She was looking for insurance papers, bank statements, anything that looked official. In the bottom right drawer, beneath a stack of corporate letterhead, her fingers brushed against a small velvet bag. She pulled it out. It contained a single high-end USB drive. She stared at it, a knot tightening in her stomach, and slipped it into her pocket. Frustrated, she moved to the credenza behind the desk. As she knelt to check the bottom cabinet, her knee pressed against the thick Persian rug. She felt a subtle give, an unevenness in the floorboards beneath. It was almost imperceptible. Curiosity overriding her fear, she pushed the heavy credenza aside and peeled back the corner of the rug. There, perfectly cut into the dark wood of the floor, was a small square panel. It had no handle, but a thin seam was just visible. Using her fingernails, she pried it open. Beneath it, set into a block of concrete, was the cold gray steel of a hidden safe, its surface marred only by a silent black digital keypad. Her breath caught in her throat. A safe. A hidden safe. People with misunderstandings didn't have hidden safes in their home offices. The cold dread that had been seeping through the cracks of her denial now flooded her system completely. The room, which had felt impersonal before, now felt sinister. This was not a workspace. It was a vault, and she was suddenly terrified of what secrets it held. Emily stared at the keypad, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sleek, black surface was a silent challenge, a gateway to a truth she wasn't sure she could face. For a frantic few minutes, she let her fingers hover over the numbers, her mind racing. She tried the obvious first. Leo's birthday. Access denied. Her own birthday? Access denied. Their wedding anniversary? The cold electronic rejection flashed again. Each failed attempt felt like a small, personal rejection, a confirmation that the life she thought they shared was not the key to his secrets. Her mind was a blank. What other numbers mattered? Then a thought, cold and sharp, cut through her panic. What if the most important date wasn't one of their shared milestones? What if it was the beginning of it all? With a trembling hand, she punched in the numbers for the day they had first met. A chance encounter in a coffee shop near her late father's office building. 1023. The safe emitted a soft, electronic chime, and with a heavy clunk, the thick steel door unlatched. For a moment, she just knelt there, frozen. Pushing the door open felt like crossing a threshold from which there was no return. Finally, she took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled it open. The interior was not filled with emergency cash or precious jewels. It was worse. It was an arsenal of deception. On top lay 3 passports, all bearing David's photograph, but with different names: a Canadian, a British, and an Australian identity. Beside them were several burner phones and a thick stack of bearer bonds that looked disturbingly real. But it was the object beneath them that drew her eye. It was a thick, black, leather-bound book, a ledger. It felt heavy in her hands, weighted with secrets. She opened it to the first page. The handwriting was David's, neat, precise, and chillingly detached. The top of the page was dated just 1 week after she had first met him, 10 years ago. It was titled, Project Nightingale, Seed Capital. Her eyes scanned the entry, the words blurring through a rising wave of nausea. Source, Robert Peterson, via emotional manipulation of daughter, Emily. Amount, $750,000, initial inheritance transfer. Stated purpose, secure investment portfolio for Emily's future. Actual purpose, acquisition of initial capital for long con operations. First major asset secured. The air rushed from Emily's lungs in a strangled gasp. Robert Peterson, her father, the man who had adored her, who had trusted David to care for her after he was gone. The money he had left her, his final act of love and protection, wasn't the foundation of their beautiful life. It was the seed capital for a criminal enterprise. The chance meeting, his comforting presence during her grief, his proposal, it was all a transaction, an investment, a con. She was not his wife. She was an asset to be secured. She sank to the floor, the heavy ledger falling open in her lap, the clinical cruel words staring up at her, rewriting every single memory she held dear. Kneeling on the cold floor of David's office, Emily felt a decade of her life collapsing into dust. The black ledger was a Rosetta Stone for a language of deceit she never knew he spoke. Each entry was a cold, hard fact that systematically dismantled a cherished memory. She flipped a page. An entry from 9 years ago detailed a Phase 2 investment from a secondary source, noting the name of one of her father's oldest and wealthiest friends. Emily remembered that time vividly. David had convinced her to encourage the family friend to invest with him, framing it as a favor, a way to help an old family connection prosper. The ledger noted it as a successful leveraging of the primary asset's credibility. She wasn't a wife, she was leverage. The memories came in a sickening, relentless cascade. Their chance meeting? The ledger contained a detailed dossier on her father, his business, his health, and her own daily routine, dated a month before they ever spoke. He hadn't stumbled upon her. He had targeted her. His whirlwind romance and proposal? A meticulously planned operation to gain legal access to her inheritance before she could place it with a more established, less pliable firm. She saw their wedding photo on the credenza, their smiling faces a monument to a lie. She remembered David's heartfelt vows, how he'd spoken of fate and destiny. Now she saw the chilling reality. He wasn't looking at a bride, but at the successful culmination of a long-term plan. The purchase of their beautiful home, the one she had filled with love and laughter, was listed in the ledger as operational headquarters, acquired via initial capital expenditure. It wasn't a home, it was a base of operations. The worst part was realizing the con was ongoing. He hadn't just stolen from her father. Page after page listed other names, other families, some she recognized from their town, from their circle of friends. Each name was followed by a chillingly brief summary of the method of deception. Exploited grief, leveraged business desperation, friendship feint. He had used their seemingly perfect life, their beautiful home, and his charming reputation, all built on her father's money, as a stage to lure in and destroy others. The shock that had paralyzed her began to curdle, solidifying into something else entirely. The profound grief for the man she thought she'd married was being burned away by the heat of a pure, white-hot rage. He hadn't just betrayed her. He had weaponized her love. He had used her as a shield, a decoy, and a tool to ruin innocent people. Her entire adult life, her most precious memories, her very identity as a wife and partner, had been a fraud. He had hollowed her out from the inside. The naive, trusting woman who had cried in her backyard was gone, and in her place, a cold, hard resolve was beginning to form. Just as the last vestiges of her love for David turned to ash, the phone buzzed on the floor beside her. The screen lit up with a blocked number. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it was him. Her hand was steady as she picked it up and answered, her voice deliberately flat and devoid of emotion. "Hello? Em? Oh, thank God." It was David's voice, but it sounded different now. The warmth she had always heard was gone, replaced by the slick, cloying tone of a salesman. It was the voice of a predator. "Baby, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. It's all a massive mistake, I promise. They've got the wrong guy, but I need your help. I need you to post my bail. It's a high number, but we can handle it. Just liquidate those tech stocks I told you about. She listened silently, the ledger still open in her lap. He was still playing the part, still trying to manipulate her, still believing she was the gullible woman he had married. He saw her not as a person, but as a resource to be tapped. He spoke of we and our money, and the words were like acid. I can make this all go away, Em, he continued, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper she now recognized as one of his tools. We can go back to how things were, you, me, and Leo. Our perfect life. Just do this one thing for me. The rage inside her was a cold, quiet fire. She let the silence stretch for a moment, letting him squirm in the darkness of his jail cell. Then she spoke, her voice as level and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. No. There was a pause on the other end. What? Em, what are you talking about? Don't be emotional. We have to— I went into your office, David, she interrupted, her tone unwavering. I was looking for insurance papers. She let him absorb that before continuing. I found the safe. The silence on the line was now absolute, heavy, and panicked. She could almost hear his mind racing, the gears of his deception grinding to a halt. And inside, she went on, her voice dropping but losing none of its steel, I found the passports, and I found your little black book. I found the ledger, David. She paused, delivering the final fatal blow. I saw my father's name. A choked, strangled sound came from the other end. The confident, reassuring husband was gone, replaced by the cornered animal he truly was. Emily, listen to me. You don't understand. Oh, I understand everything now, she said, a bitter clarity ringing in her voice. And I've already called Agent Jensen. He's on his way to pick it all up. The ledger, the passports, the USB drive I found in your desk. Everything. She stood up, looking at the wedding photo on the credenza with dead eyes. A divorce lawyer will be contacting you in the morning. Emily, wait! Don't do this, he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. Think of Leo! I am thinking of him, she said coldly, and hung up the phone, severing the last tie to the man who had never really existed at all. 6 months later, the sprawling house in the Virginia suburbs was gone, seized by federal marshals as an asset purchased with the proceeds of crime. The perfectly manicured lawn was being tended by strangers. Emily and Leo now lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the city, the kind of place she might have lived in if she had never met David Walker. The change was stark, but Emily felt a sense of lightness she hadn't realized she'd been missing for a decade. The air in their small apartment was clean. It held no secrets. David, faced with the irrefutable evidence from his own meticulously kept ledger, had never even made it to trial. He'd accepted a plea bargain that sent him to a federal prison for the next 25 years. His name, once synonymous with financial genius in their small community, was now a byword for treachery. The most unexpected outcome had come from the Securities and Exchange Commission. For her role in providing the primary evidence that unraveled a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, Emily was awarded a substantial sum under their whistleblower program. It was enough money to buy a new house, to start a new, comfortable life, to erase the financial sting of David's betrayal. But as she sat at her small kitchen table staring at the notification letter, she knew she couldn't keep it. It felt like blood money, tainted by the same crimes that had funded her old life. She thought of the names in the ledger, the grieving widow, the couple who lost their retirement, the small business owner who went bankrupt. Her pain was immense, but at least she and Leo were young and healthy. Others weren't so lucky. With a newfound resolve, Emily met with a team of pro bono lawyers. Together, they established a restitution trust. Every penny of the reward money went into it. Working with the FBI's list of victims, they began the slow, methodical process of paying people back. She wrote personal letters to each family, offering no excuses for David's actions, only a profound apology for the role she had unknowingly played in their ruin. One evening, while helping Leo with a drawing at their small table, Emily looked around their simple apartment. The furniture was second-hand, the view was of a brick wall, but it was theirs. It was real. She was no longer the pampered, naive wife living in a gilded cage. She was a survivor, a mother, and a woman who was actively working to build something honest and true from the ashes of an elaborate lie. She had lost a fantasy, but she had found herself. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt truly, genuinely rich.